Some NBA players become legends for their skills on the court. Others, however, make headlines for all the wrong reasons. Starting with a player who was so reckless that he put his son's life in danger. Jason Richardson was known for his insane dunks, lightning-fast drives, and making defenders look silly. But in 2009, he made a mistake so reckless, it overshadowed his highlight reel. It was a sunny afternoon in Phoenix, the kind of day where you roll the windows down and let the engine purr. But Jason wasn't just driving. He was pushing his Dodge Hellcat like he was trying to set a land speed record in the middle of the city. Undercover cops first clocked him doing 67 in a 40, which is already pushing your luck. But instead of slowing down, he hit the gas harder. Before long, the speedometer was touching 90. And here's the thing, this wasn't on some empty highway. This was a 35-mile-per-hour residential zone where kids play outside and people walk their dogs. That's 55 miles per hour over the limit. The cops knew they had to pull him over before someone got hurt. But when they approached his car, the situation went from reckless to downright shocking. Sitting in the back seat was Jason's 3-year-old son. No seatbelt, no car seat, just sitting there completely unrestrained while his dad blasted the road at nearly triple the speed limit. That was it. They arrested him on the spot and charged him with reckless driving, excessive speeding, and failure to use a child seat. When the NBA found out, he was suspended without pay, making him lose around $111,000. Richardson spent a few hours in jail before being released, but the damage to his reputation was already done. Later, he stood in front of reporters and apologized, but the irony was hard to ignore. He wanted to be seen as a protective dad, yet had just been caught doing one of the most dangerous things a parent can do on the road. Sure, this didn't end his career, but it left a stain that fans never forgot. And for some, it was the moment Jason Richardson's name stopped being about basketball and started being about that infamous drive. This next NBA player was simply a menace. Meta Stanifold Artest, who you might know better as Ron Artest or Meta World Peace, was one of the most unpredictable players in NBA history. He could drop 20 points on you, lock you down on defense, and then in the very next moment make a decision that had the entire league shaking their heads. And in 2007, it wasn't an on-court fight or a wild flagrant foul that got him in trouble. This time, it was something that hit much closer to home. A domestic violence case that landed him behind bars. At the time, Artest was playing for the Sacramento Kings. His reputation already had some dents from his infamous role in the Malice at the Palace brawl, so when police showed up at his home in Placer County, California, the headlines practically wrote themselves. The charge? Misdemeanor domestic violence and dissuading a witness. Details from the incident painted an ugly picture. An argument with his wife had escalated, and authorities believed it had crossed the line into violence. In California, domestic abuse cases are treated seriously, especially when the suspect is a public figure. Artest was taken into custody and booked into the county jail. A judge later ordered him to surrender his weapons and issued a restraining order to protect his wife and children. It was a public and personal low point. In court, he pleaded no contest to the charges. The sentence, 20 days in jail, though he ended up serving only 10 under a work release program. That meant he could leave during the day for approved activities, but had to return to custody at night. He was also hit with community service, counseling, and a fine. For most NBA players, this kind of trouble could derail a career completely. But Meta, being Meta, he somehow bounced back. He played for years afterward, even winning a championship with the Lakers in 2010. Still, the arrest was a reminder that his unpredictability wasn't limited to the basketball court, and that, for all the laughs and wild moments he gave fans, there was a darker side to his legacy that couldn't be ignored. The next player, well, let's just say no one ever expected him to do what he did. Malik Beasley's career was supposed to be all about buckets and highlight plays, but in 2020 he made headlines for something that had nothing to do with basketball and everything to do with a moment of pure recklessness. It was September in Plymouth, Minnesota. Malik had just signed a $60 million deal with the Timberwolves, which should have been the start of his prime. But instead of enjoying life, he was sitting at home when a family piled up outside his rented mansion during a Parade of Homes tour. They were just driving by, admiring the neighborhood like any curious visitors would, but Malik didn't see it that way. According to police reports, he came storming out of the house holding a rifle in his hands and told them to leave, aggressively. The couple inside the car later told authorities they feared for their lives. They sped away, immediately calling the police. When officers arrived, they searched Beasley's home, found a rifle, a handgun, and, to make things worse, a large stash of marijuana. In Minnesota, at the time, that amount wasn't just a slap-on-the-wrist offense. He was arrested and charged with felony threats of violence and fifth-degree drug possession. Now, most NBA players in his position might try to fight it in court, drag it out, and hope for a lighter sentence. But in December 2020, Malik pled guilty to the threats charge. The drug charge was dropped, but the damage was done. The judge sentenced him to 120 days in jail, and here's where his fame bought him a little breathing room. He was allowed to serve the time after the season was over. So in June 2021, right after averaging a career-best 19.6 points per game, he traded his Timberwolves jersey for a jail jumpsuit. Beasley ended up serving 78 days before being released. Afterward, he told the media he wanted to move forward, focus on basketball, and be a better role model for his son. But no matter how many points he scored after that, the image of him standing outside his house with a rifle, yelling at a random family, stuck in fans' minds. The next player was so reckless, it cost him his best friend's life. J.R. Smith's career was filled with deep threes, clutch shots, and the occasional "what was he thinking" moment. But in 2007, his "what was he thinking" moment turned into a tragedy so devastating it followed him for the rest of his life. See, JR had a dangerous habit: speeding. Not the kind of speeding where you're going 10 miles over the limit on the freeway, the kind where you treat city streets like a racetrack. In 2005 alone, he racked up 4 speeding tickets and had his license suspended 5 times. Somehow, with expensive lawyers and his NBA paycheck, he always managed to skate by without serious consequences, until June 9th, 2007. That morning, JR picked up his friends Carl and Andre to head to a cookout. The weather was perfect, music was blasting, the 3 of them were just enjoying the ride. But for JR, cruising wasn't enough. He had to feel that rush. So, he floored it. Police said he was going 70 in a 35.
Police report 28-year-old Crystal Smith was speeding and driving so recklessly at 3 o'clock this morning,
blowing through stop signs like they weren't even there. Then, as he rolled through one intersection, another car slammed into them. The impact was brutal. JR and his best friend Andre were thrown from the vehicle, landing hard on the asphalt. JR got lucky. He walked away with only a sprained shoulder. But Andre wasn't as fortunate. He suffered massive head injuries. Paramedics rushed him to the hospital, but by the time they got there, doctors found no brain activity. Shortly after, he was gone. Imagine that. One bad decision, and your best friend is dead. JR faced charges of reckless driving, speeding, failure to obey a stop sign, and failure to wear a seatbelt. A conviction could have meant years in prison and the end of his NBA career. But Andre's mother didn't want that. She'd already lost a son, and she didn't want to destroy another woman's child. Because of her mercy, JR got 90 days in jail.
I went to jail when I was in the league. Like, you know what I'm saying? I did 24 days in a 23-1 in the cell.
500 hours of community service and a 2-year license suspension. He served about 30 days before being released. During the trial, JR stood in court and apologized through tears. The sentence was light, but the emotional weight never left him. Fans still remember the tattoos, the wild shots, the championship with LeBron. But behind all that, there's a man who will never forget the summer day his speeding cost a friend his life. But this next NBA star didn't even care about what he did. Sebastian Telfair's story is the definition of how it started versus how it's going. In high school, he was a New York City legend, dropping 33 points a game, dishing out 9 assists, and having his name mentioned in the same breath as LeBron James. The media dubbed him the next big thing, a surefire NBA star. But when he made it to the league, the magic didn't quite follow. He bounced between teams, barely cracking 7 points per game. And then the trouble started. Trouble that would turn into one of the wildest rap sheets in NBA history. The first big scare came in 2006. Telfair was flying with the Portland Trailblazers when TSA agents in Boston noticed something suspicious in his luggage: a loaded handgun. Even for an NBA player, you can't just waltz into an airport with a weapon. Telfair swore up and down it was a mix-up, claiming he accidentally grabbed his girlfriend's bag. The crazy part, authorities actually believed him. The charges were dropped and he walked away clean. Most people would have taken that as a massive wake-up call. Sebastian? Not so much. In 2007, police clocked his Range Rover going 77 in a 45. He was driving with a suspended license, and when they searched the car, they found another loaded handgun under the seat. This time, there was no blaming his girlfriend. He pled guilty to criminal possession of a weapon, got 3 years probation, and earned himself a 3-game NBA suspension. For the next decade, it seemed like he'd finally learned his lesson. But in 2017, his name was back in the headlines, and this time, it was worse than ever. One late night in Brooklyn, officers noticed a Ford F-150 parked illegally, headlights off. Inside sat Telfair and a friend, with a lit joint resting right on the dashboard. That alone was enough for police to investigate. But when they popped the trunk, they hit the jackpot, or maybe the armory. 3 loaded handguns, a semi-automatic rifle, hundreds of rounds of ammo, a ballistic vest. Even police were stunned. It looked like Sebastian was ready for war. Given his record, prosecutors went hard. He faced up to 15 years in prison. After a 2-week trial, he was found guilty and sentenced to 3.5 years. Eventually, he posted $500,000 bail while appealing and served the rest of his sentence on probation, wearing an ankle monitor. A career that once had the New York tabloids calling him the next LeBron ended with him as another cautionary tale. Proof that talent can take you to the NBA, but bad decisions can take it all away. Unlike the others, this next player was actually a victim. Chris "Birdman" Anderson was one of the most colorful personalities the NBA had ever seen. Mohawks, tattoos covering every inch of skin, and a knack for blocking shots like his life depended on it.
Good stop here by Miami. Hand throw.
But in 2012, his life took a sudden, bizarre turn that had nothing to do with basketball and everything to do with one of the strangest criminal cases in sports history. It all started when Colorado police showed up at his home with a search warrant. They were part of the Internet Crimes Against Children unit, the kind of team you don't want knocking on your door.
Birdman Anderson, the Nuggets center, now at the center of an Internet Crimes Against Children investigation.
The news spread instantly, and in the court of public opinion, Birdman was already guilty. Reports at the time hinted at child exploitation charges. The NBA distanced itself. The Denver Nuggets told him to stay away from the team. Fans assumed the worst. But the truth was far more complicated. Anderson wasn't a predator. He was a victim of one of the most elaborate catfishing and extortion schemes ever uncovered. The real culprit was a woman in Canada who had hacked into Anderson's personal accounts, posed as him online, and lured underage women into sending compromising photos. She then turned around and used those same photos to blackmail Anderson. To make matters worse, she was running the same scam on multiple people at once, pretending to be them and playing both sides. When investigators finally pieced it together, they discovered Anderson had been targeted and framed. He was completely cleared of any wrongdoing. But by the time the truth came out, the damage to his career and reputation had already been done. The public rarely remembers the acquittal as vividly as the accusation. Birdman eventually made his way back to the NBA, even winning a championship with the Miami Heat in 2013. But the incident was a harsh reminder that in the digital age, you don't even have to commit a crime to have your name dragged through the mud. And sometimes clearing your name comes long after the headlines have already moved on. The next player couldn't even care less about what he did. LiAngelo Ball's basketball career was already under a microscope before it even began. When your dad is LeVar Ball and your brothers are Lonzo and LaMelo, every move you make gets broadcast to the world. But in 2017, while playing for UCLA, LiAngelo made a decision so reckless, it didn't just make headlines in the US, it became an international incident. That fall, the Bruins traveled to China for an exhibition game against Georgia Tech. For most players, this was a once-in-a-lifetime experience, a chance to represent their school on the other side of the world. But for LiAngelo and his two teammates, Cody Riley and Jalen Hill, the trip became a nightmare. The team's hotel in Hangzhou was surrounded by high-end luxury stores, including a Louis Vuitton right next door. The night before the game, LiAngelo and the others decided to go shopping, but instead of buying, they started taking. Surveillance cameras caught the players stealing sunglasses and other items.
Younger brother of NBA rookie Lonzo Ball have been questioned in China over shoplifting allegations.
A move that in China, where theft laws are notoriously strict, can mean years behind bars. The next morning, the Chinese police showed up at the hotel and took the three players into custody. They were interrogated for hours without English-speaking officers, their passports confiscated, and were confined to the hotel while authorities decided what to do with them. Back in the States, the story blew up. News outlets ran with it non-stop, and it wasn't long before it caught the attention of President Donald Trump. He reportedly spoke with Chinese President Xi Jinping to help secure their release. After several tense days, the players were allowed to return to the US, but the damage was done. UCLA suspended all three indefinitely, and LiAngelo eventually withdrew from the program. He would later describe the experience in interviews, calling the Chinese jail cell horrible, cold concrete floors, a generic jumpsuit, shoelaces taken away, and no one speaking English.
They take your clothes, you wear them, or whatever, take your shoestrings, and they don't speak English.
For most young players, this kind of scandal would be career-breaking. LiAngelo tried to move on, bouncing between overseas leagues and NBA summer rosters, but the China incident followed him everywhere, and to many fans, it became the defining moment of his career, a cautionary tale about how one bad decision, even from something as small as a pair of sunglasses, can change your life forever. The next player was straight up scary. Gilbert Arenas wasn't just an NBA star, he was Agent Zero, the fearless scorer who could drop 40 points on you without breaking a sweat. But in 2009, Arenas made a decision so outrageous, it turned his career from highlight reels to police reports almost overnight. It started with a gambling debt. Arenas' teammate on the Washington Wizards, Javaris Crittenton, had lost money to him in a card game on a team flight. What should have been a harmless locker room trash talk spiraled into something darker. Words were exchanged, tempers flared, and threats were made. Now, most people in that situation would just cool off and let it go. Gilbert, he decided to turn it into a joke, the kind that lands you in handcuffs. On December 21st, 2009, just days after Christmas, Arenas brought 4 unloaded handguns into the Wizards' locker room at the Verizon Center. He placed them by Crittenton's locker with a note that read, "Pick one." It was supposed to be funny, at least in Gilbert's mind, but when the news of the stunt leaked, it was anything but a joke. The NBA doesn't take firearms on team property lightly. The media exploded with the story, fans were stunned, and law enforcement got involved immediately. In January 2010, Arenas was charged with carrying a pistol without a license, a felony in Washington, D.C. He eventually pled guilty. The sentence, 30 days in a halfway house, 2 years of probation, 400 hours of community service, and a $5,000 fine. But that wasn't the only punishment. NBA Commissioner David Stern suspended Arenas for the rest of the season, costing him millions and wrecking the Wizards' chemistry. From Hall of Famers to rising stars, these stories prove one thing: no amount of talent, fame, or money can save you from bad decisions. At the end of the day, the NBA might be a dream job, but it's still real life, and in real life, one wrong move can cost you everything. If you've not subscribed to this channel, you're missing a lot, so hit that subscribe button. See you in the next one.